Hey friends, today I want to talk about my favorite project, and it's this bottle cap tabletop. It is really heavy. It has resin poured over the bottle caps, and the whole thing is metal, so it's heavy even without the bottle caps and all the resin on there, but this is a pretty solid piece. Now, the reason I like it so much is because it took a while to put together. Actually, assembling it didn't take nearly that long, but collecting all the bottle caps was a project in itself. So there's 192 different bottle caps on here, and each one is totally unique. Actually, some of them were found by friends and collected and given to me at different times, and so some of them came from different places. Like I've got one in here that's from the Bahamas. I've got one that came from France. This rusty one was found on a beach somewhere. So some of them have kind of a cool story. Some of them I've never heard of or seen from anywhere else, so who knows where they came from or what's the story behind them. But anyway, a really cool piece because of all the fun colors, and it's definitely unique. You'll never see another one quite like it. Now, here's a fun fact. This is the only resin project that I've ever done. So kind of wild that I went with something so huge, because this could have gone terribly wrong, and it almost did. So the funny thing is, I kind of did some trial and error stuff throughout the process. Kind of thought that just placing the bottle caps and arranging them wherever they kind of laid and where the colors were appropriate, that part felt like, okay, I'm going to lay them down, I'm going to pour the resin over it. The resin is going to be heavy and weigh everything down, and then it's just going to sort of do its magic, and I'll come back the next day and it'll be solid on top. Well, it didn't quite work like that, because as soon as I poured the resin, there was air underneath the caps, and the caps all started to slowly, one by one, float up to the top. So what I had to do was take a popsicle stick and start poking them back down until the resin kind of settled underneath the caps. So now that I'm knowing kind of a little more going into another resin project, I know that you do definitely want to glue everything down. That was my mistake the first time around. Thankfully, it turned out okay, and even though I had to kind of keep poking at it, I didn't get any air bubbles. You don't see any weird areas where maybe it didn't lay flat, or maybe some of the bottle caps are sticking up. None of them are halfway in the resin, halfway out of the resin, so I got lucky there. They were able to all sort of settle down, and with a nice little film forming over the top, they didn't start poking back through, but I was worried about that. So now one thing you can do is, if you do start getting little air bubbles, or you have a problem like what I had, you could use something like a heat tool, an embossing tool, to just sort of go over the area where you see some bubbles, and then that will get all those bubbles to come up to the surface, and then they'll work their way out. So that's a cool little trick that you can do as soon as you pour it. You can't come back and take the bubbles out later if you find them once it's already solid, of course. They're permanently in there at that point. But this one didn't have a whole lot of that. So if you're lucky and you're pouring over something that doesn't have a lot of gaps, you shouldn't have a problem with that. Now, there's a whole bunch of resin products on the market right now, because everybody's going crazy using those little silicone molds, something like this, where they're just making jewelry or pendants and things. And there's a lot of bangle bracelet molds, coaster molds, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because you want a coaster to be something that can soak up the water that's dripping off your drink. You don't really want it to be something that's just the water's just going to roll right off of, which is what resin's going to do. But anyways, people make cool things with it. You can dye the resin, you can put glitter in it. So they do have a lot of cool things going on with that right now. I would say if you're intimidated by it and you've never done it before, try on something like this. These are just little silicone ice cube molds, so little fish, or got a little turtle here. So you can try on a little rubber mold first, and just for your very first project, just play with it, fill it up, and then kind of, come back to it the next day and see how it does. And then once you see how easy it is to work with, then you can tackle something a little bit bigger. So that's what I would recommend. There's a ton of products out there, so how do you know which one is any good? Well, I didn't. So I just bought whatever I found online, and I found this little part A, part B, a little two-step epoxy, and you'll find that that's how resin works. They're all little two-step products. And so the point of it is, one is an activator. So once you combine them, that's when it starts to solidify. So it starts the activation process, and it is starting to harden as soon as you mix the two, and you have to do equal parts. So you'll find that that's how the products are. They are liquid until you put them together, and they start to get solid. But you do have some time to work with this, so you have some time to let it flow and get into all the cracks before it starts to harden. So that's the good news. Now, the bad news is, whatever containers you're using to mix in, whatever utensils you're using to mix the materials, because you do have to mix it very thoroughly, you're going to have to throw it away when you're done with it, or make it permanently your epoxy resin mixing bowl, because you can't really use it for anything else, and you can't wash this stuff out. So that's why I have old containers and just cheapy little styrofoam cups that I don't mind throwing out, because I will put my part A into one part of this, and then whatever line I'm filling it to, I'll fill to the same line of my part B, pour them both into an old crummy little container that already has some paint spots on it that I don't really care about because I'm missing the lid anyways. Pour them both into there and use a popsicle stick or something else that I don't mind messing up to just stir that up before I go to pour it onto the project that I'm going to be doing. So just keep that in mind. Don't think about throwing it into the sink to soak when you're done with that, because that stuff is going to clog your drains and it's going to solidify in your drains if you pour it down there. So don't even try to save your containers. Just throw them out or save it as your messy working stirring bucket. Also wanted to mention something else. So this tabletop was a little hard to find because I knew that in order to do something with resin poured over the tabletop, I needed a table that didn't have any holes. So nothing like a grid, no metal table that might have had little grid pattern on the bottom or any holes or anything like that. So it couldn't be any sort of a planter table, nothing like that. It couldn't be one of those little garden end tables. It had to have a lip on the side. It had to be tall enough to cover the bottle cap and then some, because you don't want to cover it just to the top of the bottle cap. You want to be able to cover the whole top of it, and so you don't feel the bottle caps when you're touching it. So it was very hard to find a tabletop quite like this. I just happened to be walking by an aisle in IKEA one day and just saw it right in the middle of the store, and it was a display, and I bought it, and I think it was like $20, and it was this funky yellow color, but I do know they make other colors of this. I think they make a dark green and maybe a dark red, but I also heard a really good idea from somebody is that you can spray paint these if you don't like the color, because you can see the color in between. In between all the bottle caps, you can see that color. So if that color bothers you and it's not going to go with your color scheme and whatever you're trying to match, then just spray paint it first and then you don't have to worry about it. So I think having a black background might have been cool on this. That way it would have made all the colors pop, but I really don't mind the funky yellow color. It just kind of goes with the cool little eclectic look of the whole thing. So I really love this piece for all those reasons, but it just happened to be the perfect size for what I wanted to do. But today's project is going to be on something similar in that, yes, it has a lip, but this is a little wooden tray. So I stained it. This was a light wood color craft tray. Just got it from Michael's, like you could buy anywhere. It's kind of a small one. I kind of like the bigger ones that have the little handles, but the problem is those handles had the hole. So if you pour resin, you have to be careful about the level and how high up you're going with the resin, because the resin will just slip right out that hole that's in the handle. So unfortunately, this one does not have a handle, but after you're done, if you wanted to sort of fix something on there, like a little rope handle, you could. I wanted this to be a little kitchen decoration, and so I want this to have wine corks on there. I just used a little bit of stain to finish it off, and this was done like a week ago, so this is nice and dry now, and I just use an old brush to do that. But then I also had a feeling that if there might be a little gaps wherever this was sealed together, I didn't want there to be any possibility of leakage, where maybe my resin would slip right out and I'd be wasting it or making a big mess when it's sitting to dry. So if you can tell, I just went along with a glue gun and sort of sealed the crack here. So I just put a whole bunch of globby glue in there and really got the corners good, because I don't want there to be any leaks, no surprises. So this is ready to go. So I have a whole bunch of wine corks, and I'm going to arrange them on here to sort of lay them out and come up with a pattern. And I learned my lesson from before, so I have a glue gun ready, and I'm going to glue each wine cork down once I decide where they're going, because you don't want to just start gluing. You might want to move one, or you might decide one looks better somewhere else or whatever, because they're all a little bit different. So let me get my wine corks and we'll start coming up with a pattern for that. Okay, so I'm kind of figuring out what kind of pattern I want. I definitely want it to be sort of like bricks. You have some going this way, some going that way. And I'm just sort of working with them to see what works, what fits. I don't know how I feel about this. This one's a little short. I might have to get rid of that one. And I don't know if I want to be as crazy with this one as I was with the last one in saying that they each have to be a different wine cork. I like that for the bottle caps. I just thought they were also different and colorful, and that was the point of it, is because I wanted to see all those colors and just showcase all that. But with this, it's a little different because the wine corks are all pretty much the same color. So I don't think I care so much if they're all different, just that I do want to follow this pattern and I kind of want them to fit well. So I'm going to go through and do that. One thing I don't like is these fake ones. So there's a lot of wine brands that are doing these fake corks. They're just made of plastic or rubber or whatever. I don't like those, so I don't want to show. You can do different crafts with these, and I have used them before to make different things, but because they can slice very easily because they're made of foam or whatever. But definitely don't want them on something like this. I want these to be all authentic corks, and I want to be able to show all the really cool, you know, the actual coloring on there and all those little grains in there. So I want to show something like that. Now, I am a wine drinker, but I don't drink this much wine. I do have a whole bunch of corks. I probably have like 500 of these different corks, but they were all mostly given to me by different people who wanted to donate to the crafting cause. So I appreciate all of those people. And some of them have these little, you know, where you pull the corkscrew out, kind of has a little bump, a little notch there. I'm trying to mess with that and take that out of there. So anyway, I'm just going to keep going with this and just arranging and until I'm happy with the way they're all situated, and maybe swap them out as needed. And then I'll start gluing them down. All right, I'm pretty happy with the way this worked out. So now I'm going to go and start working my way from one side to the other with the glue. And just kind of having to remember which one I've done, and so I don't keep picking up the same one. So that way, that's why you want to work from one side to the other side. And you don't need a whole lot of glue either. So just gonna put a little drop down there and just let it fall right into it. If there's something like the brand name or a little design on the corks that you really want to show because it's just something special, then like on this one, I definitely don't want to see the code. I just want to see the grapes. So I'm just going to glue that part down. So, you know, just a tiny drop of glue. It's just so that they stay put, so you don't have to go and fight with them later when you're pouring the resin over it. So the tiniest drop of glue, situate them the way you want. So you want to show off that little brand name on there, whatever it is, then just make sure that you twist it the right way so you can see it. And maybe if you don't, I don't know if I really want two grapes near each other, so I'll probably put the other grapes maybe over here. There we go. I'll put this one right next to it, that. And maybe I'm being a little too picky. Probably doesn't matter a whole lot. Just about done finishing up the last few corks. And one thing I'm really not good at is opening the bottle and removing the cork without pieces of cork falling into the wine. So I always need a little help with that. But it looks like most of these came out pretty clean. So for my purposes, that's actually a really good thing, because then I don't have a whole bunch of crummy corks. I have a nice clean little spot on there where they were screw out, without leaving a big old gap in there. So I'm just going to go now and pull all my little strings of hot glue, because I don't want those to show. And I know that some of them will be able to hide when I pour the resin over, but not all of them. Another little trick you can do is, after pulling kind of the chunky pieces off, you can just plug in your heat tool and sort of melt them away. No, they're still going to be there, but they'll just sort of form onto the cork somewhere and you won't see them. So if you want to do that, you can just kind of go over and melt them away. And then we'll get started on mixing our resin. Now you want to wear gloves when you're going to do this, because the stuff is pretty strong, and if it gets on your hands, well, you'd want to wash it off quickly, but then you also have the problem of you don't want it to get in the sink, and so you kind of want to just wipe it off with a paper towel and throw it away, but you do have to wash your hands. So, and I just wear gloves so I don't have to worry about it. It doesn't get on my nails. It doesn't, you know, get under my nails or anything like that. I don't have to worry about it. I don't know if it burns your skin or what, but I know this stuff is pretty serious business, so you don't want to mess around with it. And I wouldn't say getting it in your eye is a good idea either. So now's a question of why is this stuff yellow? Because the other one is white, and you would think that resin should be clear. Oh yeah, not exactly white, but clear. You would think it should be clear, right, if you're going to pour it over something. And indeed, this same resin was clear when I poured it over the bottle cap tabletop. But when this is exposed to heat, this will happen. And we're in Florida, so there's a lot of heat. And I do keep it by a window. That's just the shelf where I keep it, is kind of by a window. So a lot of heat gets in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so this happens just over time. I mean, I'm talking like a year of it sitting there in the sun. So it's okay. You don't have to throw it away. You can still use it. That color's not going to go away. But if whatever you are pouring it onto is not going to matter, and in this case, I mean, look, the color's pretty much the same. So it's not going to matter. It's going to go really well with the wine cork color. So that's going to match up really nicely. I wouldn't use this on something where I want to see the color, no. And so, you know, people have suggested different ideas for what you might use this kind of a tabletop for, or when you're trying to, you know, use your collection and display it some way. So people have suggested things like coins, and I think if you're using coins, this would be fine. It wouldn't really change too much the color or the look of that. But other people have suggested seashells. I probably would make sure you use a fresh one that's not turned yellow, because then you want to see the color of the shells, and a lot of shells are going to be white. So it's going to look a little funky if you pour this over it. But, you know, try to just don't waste something like this, because this one was, these are $30 each for these 2 bottles. I mean, you get a lot, so I didn't feel like that was too much money, but you get, this is for 2 gallons. So it was, or I think it's a little less than a gallon. But anyway, $30 for each one. I'm not going to throw this away. So I'm just going to, I'm going to start to measure it out. Now, you can measure it out, and you can let them sit there. And then you can go find the tool that you're going to be mixing with. Popsicle stick, I would recommend. And you don't have to worry about anything happening, any chemical reaction happening, until you put the 2 together. So this has this little safety thing in the lip. So I'm just going to pop that out. And there we go. So I'm going to make sure that I have the same amount of each. It's not super, super terrible if you have a little more of one or a little less, whatever. But you want them to be pretty close. I think I'm just going to fill this almost all the way to the top, like that. It also smells really strong, so if you can, use a vent, use a fan, open a window, or when you're done, just leave right away, because this looks like apple juice. Oh my gosh. Yeah, don't leave anything like that sitting around, because some kid might get thirsty. It does look like apple juice. All right, I'm sealing it up right away because I don't want anything to drip off the lid. And I'm going to do this one. Okay, if it spills, oh man, I don't know. I've never thought about how to clean up a resin spill. I don't really want to think about that. Let's just hope it doesn't spill, so please don't spill it, because I don't want to think about a mess right now. I don't do messes well. All right, this one's really thick. That other one was pretty watery. This clear one's pretty thick, like a gel. So if you can see that, I've got it tipped over completely, and it's just kind of barely coming out of there. So I just want to make sure I get the same amount of each. Now, we've already talked about how expensive this stuff is, so you definitely don't want to waste any. You don't want to pour more than you need, because you can't put it back if it's already mixed. So what do? Well, you can pour too little, and that's okay. You can pour a layer of this stuff and then find out that, hey, I need some more, and just pour some more. I have seen some projects that are really cool where people layer the resin on purpose. And this stuff is taking forever to come out. They layer it on purpose, and they've done like a little, they let it dry, of course. They do a thin layer, they pour it over whatever they're putting it onto, and then they might paint something on the layer. And then once that paint is dry, you know, they'll pour some more fresh resin over it and paint something else. And then you get the illusion of depth, and it looks like, you know, you have like fish swimming at different levels in the ocean. So it's pretty cool, actually, with clear, or I guess you could use blue if you wanted to. All right, so I'm almost there, and I'm going to pour these into the container so we can mix. Okay, now how important is it that you pour them both in at the same time? I don't really know. So I'm going to pour them both in separately so I can pay attention to what I'm doing, because I don't think I have the coordination to pour them both in at separate times. So this liquidy one got out pretty easy. Remember, you have to throw that away. And I'm just going to use this. This one's thicker. So the yellow one was the hardener. And this thicker one, this is more like a gel. I'm going to help it out with the popsicle stick. Now, you don't want to leave these two, now that they're mixed. Well, they do need to be stirred. But now that they are combined, we'll say, you don't want to leave them, because if you do, if you walk away, you're going to have hardened resin in the bottom of a Tupperware container, and you will have totally missed the point of pouring it over your wine corks. And keep in mind, this might not be enough, but we're going to do what we can with it. And if we need to do a little more, we can always come back and do a little more. I'm going to stack those. Okay, you stir it well, but you want to stir it quickly, but not to a point where it's sloshing around and spilling out of the container. You don't want to get it in your eyes, nose, mouth, ears, anywhere really. So stir this well. You know, it's kind of nice that I've got 2 different colors here, because it makes it easier to tell when it's thoroughly stirred, because I don't see the swirls anymore, so I know it must be working. So that's kind of cool. All right, this would be the point where also, if you wanted to add some color, if you wanted to tint it for whatever project, if you were doing jewelry or whatever, you want it to be blue or pink, you put your food coloring in now. You could do that, or your glitter, because you definitely don't want to do it afterwards. But So that's pretty good. Okay, so if you don't mix it thoroughly enough, you might find that there are some areas that just stay a little sticky. Never fully hardens. It'll just be kind of gooey. Some areas will be nice, but some areas will be a little gooey. So that's why it's really important to just get all those corners wherever you think you might have missed. Go over it again. It doesn't hurt to do it again. Okay. And we're going to bring over I'm doing this all very gently because I don't want to slosh anywhere. All right. Bring over a little tray. Okay. And I'm just going to pour it right over. Oh, how cool is that? It just has such a thick, shiny finish. It ends up looking like plastic when it's done, or glass. Is so cool. And I love it for that. Now I might need to help this along. I might need to sort of tilt it and get it to go all over. All right. Also, okay. Let's see here. Sort of making sure it's getting all over. And then if there's any area that needs touching up, that will be easy to do. It's thick enough where I can do this. Just be sure it doesn't go over the edge, because if it gets up on the side of your nicely stained wood, then, well, you're not going to see that stained wood anymore. You're going to see a shine there. So it did kind of have some gaps in there. So when you let this dry, but I like it like that. I think that's really cool. It's protecting the cork, so it's going to stay just like that. When you sit it somewhere to dry, I don't know who's got uneven tabletop surfaces out there, but if you do, you don't want to set it on an uneven surface. You want to make sure this is set somewhere that is completely level, because if it's not, whatever angle that table is at is how this is going to dry. So you might have some crooked surfaces if not. So just put it on something flat. You don't have to get crazy and get the leveler out, but you don't want to set it on something crooked, or like have it where it's sitting up on a towel or something is stuck under it, because that's how it's going to dry. So it needs to be flat. But this is actually really cool, even with that yellowy tint, and I even kind of like it more because it made them look a little aged. You know how some of them have that natural aged look because it's just a darker cork and it looks really cool, but some of them you can tell it's kind of, there's a little bubble popping up. Some of them you can tell it's just a little bit kind of a newer, maybe a cleaner look, and it just doesn't look as cool, you know, it's not as rustic. You can definitely see some bubbles popping up now, and that's because there's cracks in there, and the resin is moving and working its way into all those cracks right now, and so bubbles are popping up. Some of them will go away on their own. Some of them you might need to help them out with either the heat tool or a toothpick or something. This is a really cool project. This was actually pretty quick and easy. No need to be intimidated by the fact that, you know, it's resin and you may have never done a resin project before. I'm going to try it out on something cool. Have a little collection of something that you have sitting in a jar and don't know what to do with it. Well, this is kind of a cool way to preserve it and display it. So really fun, and definitely worth the risk of possibly messing up whatever project you're doing if you can just practice a couple times on you know, some smaller projects like we had talked about earlier.